All right. So earlier, I just recorded a video and I was discussing the whole concept of you can always die, but it's a quote by Himura Kenshin from the anime, from the manga Rurouni Kenshin, and the anime as well. You can watch it on Netflix. But anyways, you can always die. It's living that takes courage. And by the end of the video, I got to a point where it's like I was trying to describe courage in the form of like actually adhering to what the present moment wants. So effectively, what I did was I explained that as in our nature, we kind of like create energy as human beings, right? Like we eat to sustain ourselves, but we also are able to kind of like push that energy outwards. And it's just taking like whether it is moving, walking, we're exerting energy. Whether it is we're crafting, focusing, thinking exerts energy, whether it is pushing a car, hiking, all of these things. And we decide where we want to exert energy, right? Like we kind of like have that. And I feel like the way I was trying to describe courage is basically not being the ones exerting, putting our energy out. And a fun way to think about it is like I decided I wanted to hike and I went there and I'm exerting energy to hike the mountain, right? And there's this, that's the separation between like me, the ego, has decided he wants to exert energy that way. And that's the easier things, the more connected you are to things. Like, I have a friend of mine, I have a cousin of mine. If you mention the gym any time of the day, he automatically full energy and ready to make that decision. While I have another guy, it doesn't matter what you mention, as long as it's not gaming, there is no energy for it. But if you tell him gaming, let's go play a game, and it's the online game, like there are a few games that he's involved in. The minute you actually mention that, literally his eyes like kind of spark up. But when it comes to movements, no. But when it comes to concentrating and playing the games, like he's been leveling up like extremely, which is fun to actually kind of consider because each of them has their own ego towards what it is they do. And I was discussing the whole like where does courage stand? Because like when I'm trying to do something, what effectively I'm doing is I'm avoiding everything else that I can do in order to do something. That's the one way I thought about it. Because where do distractions come from? You'd be like writing, for example, a paper, and then suddenly a thought comes from the past, or a thought comes about the future, or a thought comes about a different thing that you thought of earlier that you might end up doing at the end of the day, or maybe a text message you wanted to read, a notification you wanted to see what it's about, or like a text message you read, or a notification you never saw, right? Like all these kinds of things kind of just come and start scrambling your mind. Be like, no, since you're giving attention away, give me attention, give me attention. And saying it out loud this way actually makes me see how scheduling actually makes more sense because like your mind kind of like allocates time slots or at the very least spaces in your head for a certain movement through the things that are coming out. Which is funny because like there's a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, super beautiful book, and it literally describes how when you empty your mind of all the things that you're thinking about and you kind of like get rid of them one after the other, you're able to kind of glide through your tasks and all the good stuff. But going back to courage, so you egotistically, your ego basically, sorry, I assume you guys know the difference between egoist and egotist. And anytime I'm discussing ego, I'm discussing it from an egoist's perspective. Like I am effortly working towards the image of myself, specifically because I would rather to approach things a certain kind of way and the other way. Now, keep in mind, or the egotistical part is literally just creating an image and just representing that instead of an egoist prepping themselves to have that as the image that they're seeing. There's a big difference. So, and we can talk about that if anyone actually ever comments. So, anyways, uh, true courage is not really when it comes to kind of like living the moment or just like kind of like living in general. Like, what do you call living? Because like throughout the day, I also mentioned that in the earlier video that like you're living mainly when you're doing stuff you want to do, and when you're kind of when you're doing stuff you kind of don't want to do, and that kind of is like important. These small things that kind of like extend, whether and they make you feel bad afterwards, always they don't really make you feel, they don't really make you feel uppity, excited, happy, mellow, the feelings that are like the better feelings within our nature, the preferred, I guess, maybe feelings. And weirdly so, like, the way I derived your ego kind of like making decisions is the courage is to have the ego not make the decision. And because when the ego makes a decision, when you make a decision, what you're doing is you're deciding where you want to exert your energy. So then letting the energy out of you is an energy consuming, right? Whilst on the other side, if we kind of like, instead of deciding we want to hike, if our decision was to go up the mountain, then walking up the mountain is no longer us pushing ourselves to kind of like hike. It becomes the mountain kind of like absorbing, or taking the energy from us. I think that's the major difference between the people that are kind of like, and I think that's probably why they discuss goal orientation, because people that are goal oriented don't really like don't really have that energy consumption that other people do that are trying to get something done. Because effectively, when it comes time to do something, it's part of the overall like roadmap, I guess. So it's fine if it takes away energy from us. We don't really have to think where we need to give our energy. It just kind of like comes to us. And then slowly we're able to kind of like gauge whether what's taking energy from us is something that we want to give that energy or not. It is easier for us to kind of really I'm thinking about this bottle of water. So to get water up while I'm like holding it like this, I kind of have to press and squeeze it so the water kind of levels up. There's not enough water, but like it works because like if your energy levels are high, you can kind of like squeeze them all out and it flushes. But the easier way is to kind of like allow gravity. So you decide where you want to put the water on is the same as watering something. Like if I have a plant, me deciding I want to put water on the plant allows me to do this, right? To think of this as a more efficient way. But if my goal was to throw water out of this bottle, if my goal is to expend the energy, right? And then I go find the plants, I'll probably not do it the most efficient and effective way. Now, it's easy for you to make that decision when it comes to water, mainly because you're used to it. When it comes to other things, especially when you're exploring, and I'm talking in the terms of like me, how I'm trying to find my harmony on the road where a lot of things that I want to do kind of like build on top of each other. Because my goal is to be to write better. My goal is to play guitar better, learn music better, understand, I guess, public speaking better. Yeah, I don't guess I know. And I want to basically analyze businesses better, and I want to build a certain system that people would be able to operate with and use a software in order to like kind of like bring it to life. And so I need to program better, and I need to architect better, and I need to design better, right? So it's not one thing I want to become. I want to get everything's kind of like building. And this kind of like feels a bit nice right now, simply because it feels like overall me actually creating these bigger like having a vision right now is kind of like feeling where everything else that is my job becomes just to exert energy on noticing if this contributes to the vision or not, and making decisions about what needs to be done becomes easier and easier the more you understand your vision, because then like all the smaller parts are just like, okay, I'll get this done today, I'll get this done today, I'll get this done now, I'll finish this while I'm doing this, and you'll be able to kind of develop that sort of approach. So here, going back to the previous quote, you can always die. It's living that takes courage. What is living if not allowing actual life to kind of like happen and for you to be a part of it? And being a part of it literally means you don't get to interfere. And not interfering means that you literally do not decide. Because anytime you decide, you're kind of like imposing. Whilst the truth is, when it comes to life, everything really just comes to you as you are. And so one assumes with the ego that you are fully capable and allows you to operate within these assumptions, whilst the other one allows you to just like come close within your own powers and eventually just get it over with and evolve through that process. And I think that's courage. This was very interesting. It's a fucking video, man. Yalla, bye.